In May of 2024, I started making videos for my patrons over on Patreon about the Dragon Age games. Part of this was that I love those games, but it was also partly because I was anticipating the release of the fourth game in the series. As you are all undoubtedly aware, on November 1st that game, retitled Dragon Age the Veilguard, finally released, and I posted a video essay looking at some discourse around the game in advance of its release. I called that video Dragon Age Has Always Been Woke, and I felt I made some strong observations in it. I listened to feedback from a lot of commenters and members of my community, but one thing I noticed is that a lot of my commentary about the issues faced by marginalized groups in society and the commentary leading up to the game's release went unchallenged. There were a few people here and there who had different reads on things, and I let that percolate as I kept that discourse in mind for a video many months later, last April, called The Truth About Anti-Woke Grifters. That video was much more exhaustive and personal, getting into where I had been all those previous months and why I thought the issues I was conveying there were so important and worth addressing in such detail. You may notice that I haven't done a follow-up to either of those videos, and this is basically because I've been worried about other stuff. When I can make videos, a prospect that has involved several technical hiccups of late, I've been trying to only post material that I feel involves me sharing something with you that I think is worth saying. This is another reason I haven't made another video like those two yet. I haven't actually found anything new to say that I haven't said yet. The difficulty with addressing a topic exhaustively is that you exhaust yourself. I do plan on addressing the general vibes with video game discourse a little bit before the year is out, and I have a few videos about some responses to films that have come out recently that have been, interesting is a bad word for an essayist to use because it's inherently redundant, given I'm exclusively trying to tell you interesting things here. But I guess interesting enough to mention is how I'd put it. Interesting enough to write an essay about. Interesting enough to dedicate hours of my one human lifetime to watching videos from shoddy YouTubers for a sense of their underbaked arguments. Our kind of interesting over here on this channel. I was holding out to talk more about Veilguard in the main channel until it had been a year post-release and I had enough time to work on other essays and let the game simmer in my mind palace. But that ends here, at least for the next quarter hour of your life, because I finally have another reason to post a main channel essay about Veilguard. Don't worry, plenty of other Dragon Age is on the way. This is just a teaser. The real news is that Veilguard won the Game of the Year award for World of Wonders 2025 Gaming Awards, with a Y, of course. As Sophie McAvoy writes for GamesIndustry.biz, the winners of the Gaming Awards 2025 have been announced, with Dragon Age the Veilguard taking home Game of the Year and Best LGBTQ+ Character for Rook. Hosted at the Abbey in West Hollywood yesterday, July 8th, Code Coven took home the Industry Diversity Award, while Stream for a Cause won the Community Impact Award. Naturally, we're talking about last year's releases, so the games Veilguard was measured against would have given some strong competition in the 2024 Game Awards, where Astrobot won Game of the Year. The idea of having a Game Awards show specifically dealing with games that contribute to queer culture is an interesting idea in itself, although for my money, there was a title that probably deserved more attention where queer culture is concerned, that being Elden Ring: Shadow of the Erdtree. As DLC, a lot of people overlooked it in conversations about what that year's best release was, but even then, I personally think it was my favorite gaming release of 2024. The relationship between the characters of Miquella and Saint Trina, in particular, deserves more attention and queer analysis. I guess that's another thing for the future of this channel. Veilguard pulled other awards, specifically for the character of Rook and some of their voice work, as noted by Jack Coleman of The Gamer. The Veilguard's protagonist, Rook, took home the award for the best LGBTQ+ character, with voice actor Erika Ishii receiving the award for best LGBTQ+ voice actor for her portrayal of Rook. Every year, I'm honored to uplift and celebrate creators, game makers, and industry workers throughout our awards, said Gaming Awards founder Robin Gray. This year's winners represent a wonderfully diverse group of people, all of whom are working to make our industry better in their own way. Whether that's creating games with storylines and characters that represent us, creating communities and holding space for LGBTQ+ people to be themselves, or by changing the industry piece by piece to be more inclusive. Now more than ever, we need to be supporting each other, championing each other, and defending each other. Our partnership with World of Wonder this year has helped us to do this in a bigger and better way, and I couldn't be more grateful and proud, Gray concluded. Now, there's no reason to be mad about this. I mean, really, you have all the facts about the event in front of you. It would be really, really silly and tacky to be mad about this event. Moreover, given that these are the facts, it would be really odd to go out of your way to mislead people about it and act like there's something wrong with queer people talking about queer issues and queer portrayals of queer characters and relationships. Even if you don't care about award shows, which generally I don't outside of finding it passingly interesting what games in a given year people felt were notable, and even if you aren't queer and don't care about queer issues, you're probably creative enough to understand why some people would find this entertaining. Some people just find it interesting to talk about these things in a constructive or appreciative manner, especially when they connect with it on a personal level. If that's not you, that's fine. Nobody's making you subscribe to World of Wonder's streaming service anyway. Regardless, a small group of channels tried to grift off of this, as per usual. What I find interesting is why so few people actually picked up on this. I imagine right-wingers who use media and advertising as a proxy for their need to propagandize about their views find even the headlines about this event less alluring than the game's release itself, because unlike public advertising about the game, which many of them have not played, the event isn't as widely publicly circulated. It's a platform and community thing, you know? Let's look in brief at some of the stuff the anti-woke commentariat on YouTube had to say.
So, this game was quite the release from BioWare that a lot of people were frustrated with because it didn't fall in line with what they were expecting out of the Dragon Age series. But don't let that stop a good ideology from being pushed forward from activists, all the way to the point of not just nominating this propaganda mess for Game of the Year, but actually winning it. So we're going to head over to gaming, the home of queer geek culture, and just dive into the mentality of these people, or lack thereof, and seeing what they have seemed to push forward for awards. Categories. Game of the Year. The Game of the Year award celebrates the best game released in 2024, as chosen by our diverse panel of judges. If everyone is gay, I would not say that's a diverse panel. I would say that is the opposite of being diverse. That is very like-minded people. They keep using this word diverse. I don't think they know what it means. They just want it to mean what they want it to mean.
Wow, that was really stupid. This video is titled Dragon Age the Veilguard won Game of the Year 2025 because it's gay, which is a really stupid and dishonest bit of clickbait, since obviously the gaming awards are about celebrating queer culture in gaming and not about comparing those games with other material not relevant to the awards. We can always count on Smash JT for the dumbest take imaginable. You'd think he'd be more worried about that lawsuit he's embroiled in, but then again, desperately pulling views using anti-gay sentiment is probably the behavior of someone who would also insist he's veering dangerously close to sacrificing his relationship with his wife and kids over his slop content, so maybe it's to be expected.
Because if I do not get the money needed for this lawsuit, I genuinely don't know how we're going to proceed with it, unless we start digging into my personal kids' college fund savings, which is not even that much. But I'm like, at this point, are we really going past $100,000 for someone saying you said mean words to me and now affecting my kids going to school for this? What are we fucking doing here?
It's enough to give one cause to wonder why a gentleman who anticipated having financial difficulties in sending his children to college would even feel compelled to go to war over hate content like this. A thing which, I have to stress, is only happening to him because he declined to take his videos attacking and spreading misinformation about Alyssa Mercante down in the first place. Smash JT had a perfect out to this situation that would have cost him nothing but YouTube views and AdSense, but apparently that was too much to ask, and now he has to go on stream and beg people to send him increasing amounts of money with seemingly no upper limit. His current updated goal at time of writing is $200,000, all because his ego was so big. But I suppose it's probably worth addressing what he actually said, right? Smash JT makes the argument that the panel behind the gaming awards can't possibly be diverse if everyone is gay. This is a classic line of attack from homophobes that I've been seeing for my entire lifetime. The real reason the queer community calls itself diverse is the same reason the rainbow is a symbol of our community. The idea behind it is that we're not just one thing, we're many things, many identities, many experiences that are outside of a cisgender and heterosexual norm. All those many different identities have come together to form a culture that exists in many ways cooperatively, and so now uneducated peddlers of half-baked bigotries get to stream from their odorous gaming chairs and stumble their way through an incoherent dialogue about how actually we aren't the diverse ones. But being a part of this community isn't about being one identical thing, it's about being one or more of many different things apart from the norm. Queerphobes know this, but queerphobes are liars.
They present it as if, oh, we need to raise money because this industry has no representation, which is insane. The gaming industry has so much diversity in it, from the people who make games to the characters on screen. We are talking about getting to the point of over representation at this point. But no, guys, they need to make money. So they need to convince you that it's still a problem.
I wonder who Vera Dark thinks she's talking to here. Like, let's slow it down and talk this one through, shall we? WoW Presents is mainly popular on YouTube for its drag content, and a lot of their other stuff doesn't get as much notice, and if you're subscribed to them, or even did your due diligence to watch the trailer, you'd know this show was on their streaming service WoW Presents Plus, meaning it's paywalled content. The money the people making the show make from the show is due to the paywall and advertising. They're not running a charity for their own show. Who does Vera Dark think is hosting the gaming awards? Smash JT? Somehow, I don't think he could pull off a drag persona, but hey, anything is possible. Okay, everybody, this is Editing Chariot here. I realized that I missed the conflation that Vera was making when she was saying that. So I am coming back as I'm editing this and putting it together just to kind of record what I would say about this, which is that actually if you pause her video and you look at the specific paragraph that seems to have set her off, it's the one right in the middle, third from the top, about the gaming awards and the gaming foundation. This didn't occur to me immediately because it seemed like she was conflating multiple things, but actually it seems like what she's saying here when she's talking about raising money is the Gaming Foundation, which is a non-profit extension, if you check their website, of Gaming Magazine. Now, Gaming Magazine is not the same thing as World of Wonder. These are two different things. One of them is like hosting, and the other one is actually like doing the awards. So this is like very, very muddled, the way that she's presenting it, but I just thought that was interesting because that's about to play into the point that I'm going to make in a second, and I would feel bad if I didn't point out that because I had missed it earlier when I was first scripting this video, and I just thought that was worth pointing out here. Here again, we have another classic piece of old-school homophobic rhetoric. For my entire life, homophobes have alternatively claimed that if queer representation becomes too widespread, it will have negative effects on the culture, and also that queer representation is already in everything. This new generation of homophobes is expecting you to buy the old lie on new terms, trusting that your private personal intuitions will fill in the gaps. But is that how this is supposed to work? Usually when we do any kind of analysis of an industry in terms of how many people identify as what or which identities are represented, we like to have statistical analysis. It doesn't seem like Veilguard has any of that, although if you'd like to watch another video that does, my essay The Star Wars We Could Have Gotten goes over statistical findings about the film industry in some detail. I say another video because here, dear viewer, you will be treated to actual statistical analysis of gamer demographics, something you won't get from these right-wing slop channels, who ironically use rhetoric sans facts to push an agenda even as they accuse everyone else of doing the same thing. We aren't, of course, because as previously discussed, having a position on something is not the same as trying to inculcate people with your viewpoint using deception. Doing that for money is what grifters do. Facts often lead us to another place entirely. If we examine the GLAAD research report, The State of LGBTQ Inclusion in Video Games, reported on by such outlets as Forbes, we can come away with some facts about the games industry. Here's one I felt was most relevant. GLAAD counted the number of games that have been tagged as having LGBTQ content as of November 2023 from Xbox, PlayStation, Nintendo, and Steam. According to Microsoft, there were 146 console games available in the Xbox store that had LGBTQ content. PlayStation maintained a list that includes 90 games. The Nintendo Switch eShop listed 50 games with the tag LGBT. Steam's LGBTQ+ tag returned 2,302 games available in English as of November 2023, but that number dropped to 1,506 when games with adult-only sexual content were filtered out. In context, however, these games account for less than 2% of Xbox, PlayStation, and Nintendo's total digital libraries. For Steam, it is less than 2.5%, but drops to just 1.7% when adult-only games are excluded. Major and Ho, and I hope I'm not mispronouncing anyone's name, comparing data from the LGBTQ game archive to games represented in the Moby Games database, similarly found that only approximately 1% of all games released in the 2010s included LGBTQ content. Glad's work on this subject is much appreciated because we can see here how fundamentally false the gay bashing inherent in a lot of this content actually is. What people like Veilguard are preying upon is the very human tendency to see a small slice of a much larger picture in their anecdotal experience and project that onto the whole of our society. This is a common element of many instances of political messaging that distort reality. Another, and an especially relevant one in this case, is the tendency to conflate norms with the mean end mode of a dataset. For instance, many people assume that most gamers are heterosexual men, largely based on advertising, which is also not statistics. And because by cultural norms they infer that because it isn't normal for heterosexual men to want to play as queer characters, they therefore are safe in concluding most gamers would not want to play as those characters. However, this is not statistically representative, as we can see from this breakdown in the GLAD report, where only 3 out of every 10 non-LGBTQ gamers say they would be less likely to play those games, and even fewer LGBTQ gamers say the same. There are so many lies circling this subject, but I've saved the best for last. This comes from a channel called Dr. Disaster, and I'd ask you listen very carefully to this.
Do you guys remember last year when Dragon Age the Veilguard came out, how all the game journalists and their allies out there were acting like they didn't know what we were talking about when we said that the game looked woke as hell?
There's nothing wrong with me. Maybe there's something wrong with the universe.
They called us tourists for noticing that suddenly the game franchise seemed quite immersed in gender identity politics. They had top surgery scars available in Dragon Age the Veilguard's character creator screen because of course they did. Meanwhile, if you wanted to make a female character with the body proportions of anything other than a toothpick, you were shit out of luck. It quickly became evident to anyone with eyeballs and a reasonably functioning brain that there was a very specific sort of person that this game was trying to appeal to.
That ain't no woman. It's a man.
The game was directed by a self-described queerosexual gendermancer who made sure that the game took a complete U-turn with regards to how the tone and story were handled. David Gator, one of the original writers of the franchise, who has turned into a progressive sheep over the years, he said that Dragon Age was always this way, and that anyone who didn't like it was a tourist.
As somebody who has actually played this game, which seemingly a number of the content creators taking shots at it have not, I feel compelled to point out that if you actually learn how this character creator works, you can get different proportions by combining the stat sliders that Dr. Disaster shows in his video with the two-dimensional sliders that govern muscle and body fat, which is one of those things that I guess people missed. Also, and this is just a small thing, but as a fan of the series I do have to point out that harping on that point gives big tourist energy. None of the other games even had sliders for stuff like that. The character creators from the first 2 games were, in terms of the physical design of the characters, almost rudimentary in comparison. And even my GOAT, Dragon Age Inquisition, wasn't as thorough as the Veilguard in terms of the options it presents. I'm quite sure it could have gone further in some regards, but this was actually a huge leap forward, and acting like it was anything else shows that you are, in fact, a tourist. But let's solidify that claim. First, let's look at what David Gator actually said, rather than relying on hearsay. On September 21st of 2024, David Gator posted to Blue Sky, saying, "Apparently the usual suspects are upset at how woke the new Dragon Age is. An apparently sudden and unexpected development in the series. Fucking tourists." We can see here the way in which Dr. Disaster, like so many others, lied on David Gator's name. In the first place, Gator never said people were wrong for not liking the game, so this is another classic goalpost shift from anti-woke grifters, trying to conflate their grift with real criticism. You'll notice, naturally, the date at which this post was made, 2 months before the game's release. How could a game not yet released be getting criticized for its quality in an honest manner by the average player? This is such a massive lie that it can't be anything but deliberate. But there's yet another layer to this lie. In 2014, a whole 10 years in advance of this Blue Sky post, David Gator wrote about his experience working on Dragon Age and creating representation queer people connect with over on his Tumblr blog, The Bittersweetest Thing. It can still be a little odd. I don't think of myself as a gay developer. I'm a developer who happens to be gay, and there's this one point of intersectionality where my personal life becomes relevant to my work life. And it's not easy to figure where your responsibility lies. I contribute my viewpoint to the mix like anyone else, but it's hard to find a mix between pushing for things you feel are right to do and being that guy, the one that gets dismissed whenever he brings up a topic because it's his thing. What point is too little or too much? I have a whole ton of other responsibilities on my plate, so at what point am I focusing too much on this one thing when I have so much else to do? This is a very relatable struggle to queer artists and creators who realize they are part of a team and want to accommodate the other people they're working with even as they present material that strongly resonates with them. There's also an element of second guessing which comes up, if I'm perfectly honest. If I'm proposing something involving gay content or looking at someone else's proposal which includes it, there's a part of me which wonders if I'm not unduly biased, if I'm not steering my project towards being viewed as the gay game by the audience, or filtering the content through a personal lens it might not deserve. I relate very strongly to Gator in this, because when you write a story, even as a writer who happens to be gay, which I am, it's compelling to imagine yourself capturing something fundamental and grand about humanity, about the human story, and you at times feel you have to balance that with writing about your own identity, where you might be concerned with doing too much and not reaching audiences. This is the kind of second guessing and personal questioning that a lot of anti-gay commentators often exploit, which can make it more difficult to open up as a gay creative, but I think Gator hits the nail on the head. Really, I'd just like to get to a point where this sort of thing doesn't need to be discussed, where it's simply expected. Again, it seems like the presence of a discussion at all leads some to moan about how it's all everyone even talks about, and how it dominates the video game industry, as if it could, as if that's a thing that's even remotely happening, or as if the issue's already settled and couldn't everyone just talk about something more relevant to me now? What Gator is touching on here, I feel, is what we broached earlier in discussing perceptions versus realities. There's a tendency to believe that because we, meaning queer people, are attempting to push for more, are trying to have this conversation, we must somehow be asking for too much, almost by the fact itself. This is a sort of blind faith in the status quo that emerges from a circular desire to not acknowledge that there is a problem in the first place. For the people experiencing it, we know otherwise. That's how attitudes change, after all. I'm not going to pretend we already live in tomorrow, but acknowledging the criticism and striving to do better is, as an industry, how I think we'll eventually get there. I'd like to thank David Gator for all his amazing work over the years and for his sincere attempts to use his voice responsibly. These final words really drive home the point. The reason any of this matters is that it's constitutive to that same push, that same striving, and therefore also to getting there. If I'm being honest, however, it's a pretty dark time, and while I wanted an uplifting message here, I sort of don't know if it's that easy. While I was down with COVID, I belatedly saw some reporting out of the gaming industry regarding an interview with Samantha Bayart, apologies again for any potential mispronunciation, who many of you may know as the non-binary voice actor who played Karlach in Baldur's Gate 3. When I wrote about this same issue in regards to anti-woke gaming grifters more broadly, one of the things I tried to draw attention to is the degree to which a lot of the anti-art and anti-artist sentiment out of this right-wing movement serves to hurt these industries and parallels the way executives will sometimes exploit the people who work in it. In a sense, these are less two parallel forces and more just two sides of the same social tendency. And of course, as we've seen, there's an anti-LGBTQ bias, as Rhiannon Bevan discusses with the reference to an interview with Bayart. Ever since Donald Trump's win in the 2024 US presidential election, companies and their executives were quick to try and curry favor with the president. This included ditching DEI initiatives and policies, which even more companies later joined them on, following an anti-DEI executive order from Trump. While many of these initiatives were strictly about hiring practices, the sentiment behind this shift in policy was felt everywhere, with the rise in racist, transphobic, and other bigoted laws and attitudes across the United States and beyond. Now, it seems that the gaming industry is not immune to this either. Speaking with me in an interview that will be published tomorrow, actor Samantha Bayart, who played Karlach in Baldur's Gate 3, tells me that they are already aware of game devs who have had their work censored, as the industry appears to be bowing down to the regressive politics of Trump's second term. This came up in my chat with Bayart when I asked if, in our current climate, they feared that a game as diverse as Baldur's Gate 3 would struggle to get greenlit now. Without exposing devs, I know that's happening. Their storylines have been cut, they tell me. Historically, appeasement is a really bad thing. Despite this, they are optimistic that this won't last forever. Indies exist, and people can write, and communities will get together, and we will absolutely get through this together. I wholly agree. We're all going to get there together by striving to push through these problems together. If I had to draw any lesson from the backlash, it's that this right-wing disinformation wouldn't feel so necessary to the people addicted to it if we weren't also doing something right, and it wouldn't be profitable if this fight wasn't worth fighting. That's why they lie so much. If they didn't lie, they would lose, and that gives us power. It gives us a chance. On that note, I appreciate all of you, and I'll have some more Veilguard videos for you at the anniversary of this game's release this November. Or, if you like, you can check out my Patreon for more Dragon Age and Veilguard content. Once I finish the Veilguard videos, we're doing The Witcher over there next, and I'm quite excited. Either way, thank you so much, and please take care of yourselves.